pay for the gap. All right, the gap is what's left over at the top, and the gap is what's also down here in purple in the bottom. If your expected family contribution was $5,000 and your gap is $10,000, you have to pay $15,000 up front. On top of the fact that they're probably assuming that your student's going to borrow that direct loan. So it's just important to understand that it's the expected family contribution and it's the gap at the top of this bar graph. All right, so filling the gap, scholarships. It's not too late to apply for scholarships. VSAC's scholarship program, our institutional scholarship program is closed, but there's other money out there. A lot of money goes unclaimed. So there's some great resources available on the guidance webpage for Colchester if you haven't been on, but also on our website, vsac.org/scholarships. Big Futures is the tool that College Board administers, FastWeb, CapEx. There's a bunch of other, just get online, really like Google it, get online, look for it. If you have a really big gap and a really determined young person, now would be a great time, especially if their schoolwork is slowing down towards the end of their senior year, to kick it into high gear. So scholarships are one way to fill that gap. Another way to fill that gap is going to be federal student loans. On that bar graph, there was a small subset that said student loans. Your young person, I often explain this to students. The federal student loan, think Washington, D.C., right? Think federal loan. You already applied for this loan when your young person filled out the FAFSA, or quite likely you filled it out for them. The FAFSA is an application for financial aid, but it's also a loan application. Students have access to $5,500 their first year if they're dependent students. So if they live with you, they're probably dependent. That $5,500 is probably already on the award letter from your school. Say your student is planning to go to, UNH. It's the Wildcat Direct Student Loan, right? They're probably going to put their mascot next to the name, but it's very often the federal direct loan. Students access that. They don't need a cosigner. They don't need anyone else's help. That's their student loan. Sophomore year, that lending limit goes up. Junior year goes up, and it flattens out senior year. It totals about $27,000 over the 4-year period, which is right around the average student loan debt you see bandied about in a lot of media that talks about student loans. It's no coincidence that's the federal student loan program. Challenge is very often there's still a gap after that loan. So filling the gap, what are your options? You've got the federal student loan. These interest rates are a little different for this year, but you have non-federal options, places like VSAC, and then you also have banks, credit unions, private lenders. You can really, essentially, if you're not at zero for a gap after the student loan, which most folks are not, you need to enter the private loan market most of the time. It's at that point where you sort of look at your family's financial situation, where you have banking relationships, where you like to do your business, and you can shop around. The schools are going to have information available. Some institutions have their own lending programs. So it'd be important to look at like the school's websites as well. And like I said, VSAC is also a private lender. So you sort of like, I use cars as an example when I'm talking to students. Sometimes, you can get financing for a car from many different places, or you can show up with your own financing. Similarly, that functions the same way. Parents, you're also going to notice very often that the school, depending on the award letter, it might have said like Parent Plus loan might be a term you saw on that award letter. Very graciously, the school is offering you parents access to federal loans as well through the Parent Plus program. And the challenge is sometimes an award letter will say like cost zero because they've also factored in a $25,000 plus loan into the award process, assuming that parents are going to do that. I'm not a fiduciary. It'd be important for you to think about what you're able to do, what you're willing to do, and what makes sense for your family and for your financial decision-making process. So having a conversation with your student about just because you have access to a loan might not mean it's the best bet for you, or maybe it is the right pathway for you and your student, depending on what you're hoping for. Filling the gap, private loans. So a few folks had asked questions from me in the past about VSAC's private loans, so I'll talk a little bit about that. First off, I would say call our customer service line. We'll talk to you about any federal loan. We'll talk about private loans. We have a ton of resources on our websites where you can compare loans. We have a fixed rate loan for students who need additional financing. So if that gap after the federal student loan is $7,000 or $10,000 or $20,000, and you decide you want to borrow that money, you can apply to borrow it from a place like VSAC. We have minimal origination fees, co-signer. So some families decide that the student is going to be the primary borrower. Some families decide that the parent is going to be the primary borrower. Some families decide that they want to pay while the student is enrolled in school. Some families decide it makes more sense to wait until after the student has left school. You're talking about it, generally speaking, a 4-year time period. We offer loans for undergraduates, graduates, professional students, and parents. We obviously are happy to talk to anyone about any of our loan products, but also any federal loan product as well. We highly encourage folks to call. And one little nuance I think is important. I've had great conversations with students about what is a cosigner. So sometimes students will want to borrow this money themselves because they want to have some ownership over it. But most lending institutions are not going to lend an 18-year-old $20,000 without a cosigner. So if the student needs a cosigner, what does that mean? What does that mean for the cosigner's credit? Is the cosigner one of the things that we offer with our particular loan products is we release cosigners after 48 months. So really looking into the specifics of a loan product and shopping around is a great idea. So the next.
Hey, Liam, this is a nerd question, but on those deferred repayments, how is the interest capitalized on those? Is that annually or is it the end of college?
Annually, I want to say, but best bet is to call our 800 number. But yeah, annually, it's a fine question. And then students also, like an anecdotal example here would be, I had a student who wanted to go to VTC to study to become a mechanic. His gap was smaller, but he did not have a lot of cash and he needed tools. So you can borrow up to the cost of attendance, which is a little nuance in like how costs are defined. So if there's extra costs associated, that can be helpful to help folks maybe who need a little extra help accessing financial tools. So
this is another nerd question that you may not have the answer to, but I'm just curious if at VSAC, are you seeing a lot of families choosing to refinance their homes because of low interest rates instead of doing student loans?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'm definitely not a financial advisor. I'm very, very clear about that. I think lots of families are looking at the market and looking at how they can access different financial tools in a way that makes sense for them. I'm not seeing a ton of that, generally speaking, but it's come up a lot in conversation with folks. Like, where can they access money most cheaply and in a way that makes most sense for them? Yeah. So it's a fair question.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Just one thing I would also offer, again, I have no idea who's in this room, but this Zoom room, but having a discussion with your young person about debt, if you haven't had it yet, is, I have a lot of contemporaries, even, at this stage of my life, who ask me questions about their student loans because they know where I've worked in the same place for 12 years. They know where I work, and I'll ask them back, how much debt do you have? And they'll say, I have no idea. So how much debt are they looking at? What is that multiplied by 4 years would be a really important conversation to have. I'll share these websites out with the team after, so you don't need to write them down. But Debt Wizard, you can go on and you can look at, say your student is looking at a $15,000 gap. Well, $15,000 times 4 is $60,000. What is $60,000 relative to the occupation they may want to hold? I always encourage my students to do best case scenario. So best case scenario, you get the job you want. Best case scenario, you get the best pay you could possibly get for that job. Many folks know that life isn't always best case scenario, but for the sake of the discussion, let's be positive. And then this website will show you monthly payments on that debt, how long it will take for that debt to be paid off. Generally, student loans offer a 10-year term. Folks are able to pay them off faster if they want to, but generally it's a 10-year term. So what does a monthly payment look like on $40,000 in debt versus a monthly payment on $90,000 in debt? I had a student recently meet with me for the first time, and they were looking down at $125,000 over 4 years, which for me, maybe it's just the lens I come to it with, but that feels like a lot of debt for a young person to be walking into. That's individual families need to have discussions about that, but it's important to know what a monthly payment looks like for that. If you have not figured out what your gap is, this tool right here, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, has a wonderful calculator. Well, it will link to your school. You can go in, you can link right to, well, if I click on it and mess it up, I'll do it in a second, but you can link right to your school. You can link to their tuition and fees, and it will break down the award letter. So it'll be like institutional grant money, state grant money, outside money, and it will do all the math for you, and it will really tell you what your baseline walkaway price is. It's a really, really great tool. Highly recommend spending 10 or 12 minutes on it, just to have conversations with your family about how much is this going to cost and how are we going to finance it. And then something I've been doing with students this spring, who I've been working with, like Swift Student is a great template generator for appeal letters. So I don't know about you, but I had a wild 2020. I'm guessing many of you did as well. So the expectation in higher ed this year, we're seeing it at VSAC for sure as well on the grant program, but it's a record number of appeals. So if when you filled out the FAFSA, you're good chance you're using 2019 tax information. 2020 was a wild year. So if your family's tax information or as reported on the FAFSA doesn't reflect your financial reality, if someone's got a different job, if a parent had to move in, if someone lost a job or got married or got divorced, if there's some new circumstance, you don't need to use these templates, but you're welcome to go onto this website, Swift Student, download free templates. It's just like writing a business letter. You would write it to the financial aid department. There's some free templates that kind of look at key situations. But I use this with a lot of seniors I serve. And it can be really empowering. It's by school, they're going to have different resources available. But if you can shrink that gap even by $2,000 over 4 years, well, that's $8,000 for writing a letter. So an $8,000 letter, it's not so bad. So those are generally the resources I like to share with folks. I'll try to click on it now and see how it works, because I was gonna, yeah. So can you see the website, Bob? Or no? Get started.
There we go. It's the CFPB site.
Yes, so you get started, then you could do like Florida Southern College. You link right to the school. You're getting a bachelor's degree. You can go right through every single thing, how long you want it to take you, how fast you want to do the program. Through 4 years considered, I'm going to do it in 4 years. I will be a first-year student.
Yeah, I think it's on a different screen because that's not showing up for us.
Well, it's not going to work today. So I'll share those websites with folks in the chat, and then maybe you guys can send them out after.
Sure.
I would really recommend, if you don't know what the gap is, use some of these tools and really identify what that gap is. And then it's public loans for students, public loans for parents, or the private loan market, or other resources if you have other resources, obviously. That's sort of the high and the short of it. I hope that's helpful for folks. I'm just seeing your question about recording, Bob, and I did not.
No, it's okay. I'm recording on mine.
Okay.
There is a question about 529s and how do parents start accessing the money that they've been putting away in a 529 if they've.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, VSAC administers a 529 plan in Vermont. Best bet is to contact the plan administrator and work directly with them, but this summer would be a great time. Here I can put that. If you don't know how to, if it's a 529 held at VSAC, that information in the chat, but for sure. And it's also not too late to save and contribute to it.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Oh yeah. I jokingly tell students this for what it's worth. And depending on your family's dynamic, graduation party is a great time, to celebrate the recent grads, see if you know they want to help buy your textbooks. So my aunt helped me at my graduation party, and if that's an opportunity, you know, any of your family is in a position where having a party is safe and all that, you know, good reason to come together and celebrate a young person going off into the world.
So Liam, I'm gonna pass the question to you, although I feel like I know the answer is yes, because everything on the cost of attendance counts. But the question is, can students use the federal loans or any of those other products to pay for more than just tuition, like room and board or books or associated fees?
Yeah, just that'll come off the bill. Great question. Yeah, so like say I had a scholarship to Castleton that covered half of my tuition. I could still pull my direct student loan to cover another portion. Yeah, super common. And that the direct student loans, the federal student loan that will very likely be in your young person's name, they access that through the FSA.gov or federal student or studentaid.gov, excuse me, through the federal student aid dashboard. They have to go through a brief but useful entrance loan counseling module, which it's helpful for them to actually understand what it means that they're borrowing money and what the expectation would be that they're going to have to pay that money back, depending on what happens at the federal level. But as of right now, that's where that stands. And then they sign a master promissory note. That money then goes right to the school. Once they get there in the fall, the student doesn't really see that money. It's not like it goes into your bank account and then it goes into the school's bank account. Your young person is going to have an account with the financial aid office at their school. Like when I went to UVM, it was in Waterman. I got like very familiar with the folks in that building. Really lovely people. But that money goes directly to their account and kind of comes off the bill, almost as if it was your Amazon card. This loan comes off, this loan gets dispersed, this loan comes off, and then you've got a number that you're wanting to get closer to zero. And then also one more thing I would say, schools do offer payment plans as well. So if you have a gap that's like you don't want to borrow money for it, some folks are going to use like financial tools in their wallet. Some folks will use their debit card, but you also can open a payment plan at most schools. So like when I studied at UVM, I paid one class at a time for my graduate degree, and it was easier to just open a payment plan and pay it that way. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions that are helpful? It would be helpful to answer.
And if folks are more, you can email me. My email's in the chat. If you have specific questions that are not best for shared space, feel free to shoot me an email and I will send you in the right direction or answer the question myself.
Can you go back to the loan slide?
Federal student loans.
Yes.
I'll do one better. Right to studentaid.gov's website to show folks. You have not been on. So am I on this website? Are you on the right website?
Interest rates for new direct loans.
So if you have not been on studentaid.gov, federal student aid, I just recommend spending some time on there. You can log in directly to your student's account there. This is also like it's the FSAID, that really complicated password that you made where you had to like write in what your first car was and your high school mascot. You had like 19 security questions. That's this account. But log in through the students portal through theirs. So obviously there's some interest rate movement given like national politics, but for the direct subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans right now at 2.75%, the following table provides for 2021, 2022. If you're wondering what the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized is, great question. The subsidized loans, the interest does not accrue while your student is enrolled in school. The unsubsidized loans, the interest accrues. And financial aid functionally works on an annual basis. So next fall, you're going to log back into your FAFSA after October 1st. You're going to reapply again. It's going to be way easier than it was this year, and you're going to be like, oh, that I totally could do that. Because it's going to save a lot of your information, but you're just going to put in new tax information. And just another anecdote I would offer, if your student does really well, there's no cap to the merit-based award that they can get. So maybe the gap freshman year is not really a number you're thrilled about, but you could move forward thinking, we're going to hope that freshman year goes really well and student becomes an RA on campus, or maybe the student earns more scholarships, or, you know, you can appeal that financial aid award letter every single year. And I'll put this link in the chat as well.
Right. Any other questions? So just a reminder, as Liam said, like contact VSAC if you have any questions. Also, don't be afraid to reach out to the bursar's office or whatever it's called at your student's college campus. Stuff may not have been advertised to you, like for example, the payment plan. When my son was in school, that never sort of was sent out to families that like, hey, we have a payment plan, but turns out they did do payment plans. So all you have to do is ask, and sometimes that you'll find out a whole lot of information. So, oh, do they charge interest rates with payment plans? That's school by school. Some schools do charge an interest rate for a payment plan. And I probably shouldn't put this in the video, but the school that my son went to did do payment plan, and they had a formal payment plan that did charge an interest rate. But they also were not super rigorous about following the payment plan. So like we just paid as we had money, and they never charged us an interest rate. As long as we paid before he had to register for classes for the next semester, nobody hassled us about anything. So it was sort of an informal payment plan. And, that's how they worked it. But there are, school by school, whether there's interest rates or not.
And sometimes it's just a flat fee. Like I wanted, this information is 3 years old, but I want to say it was $50 to open it when I was in school. So it was per semester. So it was relatively speaking inexpensive. And it made more sense to me than doing it a different way. So I included those. There's a bunch of templates and a few other websites I included in the chat as well. We can maybe send those out after, but spend some time on those websites, 10 minutes even, just to get comfortable with the information.
Cool. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for coming on this beautiful afternoon. Get out and enjoy the sun. And again, reach out if you have any other questions. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.